So for today's moving forward series, it's time to look at the Supporters Shield winner, the Philadelphia Union. And just like the Portland Timbers, this was kind of a glass half full season for the Union. And then there's really two ways you can look at how the Union did this season. One way you can look at it is that this has been a historical season for the Union, with them winning their first ever trophy in franchise history by winning the Supporters Shield at the end of the season. And they also are kind of considered the people's team of MLS, and a great example of what happened when an MLS team is able to believe in their academy, able to develop some great players coming out of their academy and have some success in MLS before shipping them off to Europe for a big sum of money. But on the other hand, you can also say that this has been a disappointing year for the Union because they flamed out in the playoffs. Like, this was one of the few Supporters Shield winner team that suffer an early playoff exit and suffer a first round playoff elimination. And it's just unfortunate that the Union kind of had their worst game this season in that first round playoff game against the New England Revolution. But despite that, overall they finished with a record of 14-4-5, and they finished with 47 points. They scored 44 goals this season, which is the most in the Eastern Conference, and they allowed 20 goals this season, which is the fewest that any team has been able to allow this season. And goal differential is plus 24, which is the best in MLS this season. As I said, they finished first in the Eastern Conference and overall finished first in the regular season standings, which means that they, of course, won the Supporters Shield, but they suffer a disappointing early playoff exit by eliminated in the first round by the New England Revolution at home, which was actually the only home loss that they suffer all season from that last season. Now, for the MVP of this team, again, this was definitely tough to choose who exactly was the MVP of this team, because there was so many great players and so many great candidates that I could pick as the MVP of this Union team. Now, some people will think that I could have easily just chose Brenden Aaronson as the MVP of this team, because not only the fact that Aaronson ends up to be the top assist leader of this team, but he was really the heart and soul of this team and have really become the most promising American in MLS, and definitely a guy that is on verge of making that breakthrough to make the next step to make his jump to Europe. And some would even say that he can definitely be a future U.S. men's national team starter for the national team. But instead, I'm actually going to be going with Andre Blake as the MVP of this Union team. And I guess the tiebreaker between me choosing Blake instead of Aaronson is the fact that Blake did win an individual award compared to Aaronson that wasn't able to win an individual award, which I was kind of surprised to see that happening, especially the fact that I feel like he should have won the Young Player of the Year and he kind of got robbed in terms of that award. But Andre Blake, his individual award was winning the Goalkeeper of the Year, and rightfully so. He was the Goalkeeper of the Year because he was no doubt the best goalkeeper this season. And, despite the fact that I mentioned how the Union finished with the best defensive record, there was definitely times where the Union looked a little bit shaky this season when on their defensive end. But the only reason why, even when they have those shaky defensive performance and they're not letting goals, is because of Andre Blake. I mean, he was able to be an absolute wall in front of goals and was making some incredible save, and at times really stealing games for the Philadelphia Union when they're not at their best, especially on the defensive end. So because of that, I have to put him in terms of the MVP award. And as I said, the individual award is kind of the tiebreaker for me to put Blake in here instead of putting Brenden Aaronson as the MVP of the team. For disappointment for this team, there really isn't anybody I can choose as the disappointing player on this team. I mean, if I had to pick who is probably the most disappointing player on this team, I might go with Kacper Przybyłko, and even then, Przybyłko finished as the top goal scorer of this team. But the reason why I might put him as disappointment is because he kind of really struggled in the first half of the season, and he was kind of one of the worst players in the MLS is back tournament. But as I said, I can't put him there because he still ends up being the top goal scorer, and eventually he kind of figured things out once the MLS's back tournament is over and kind of look more of his old self once we get into those phases to finish the regular season. Now, as I mentioned, the top goal scored is Kacper Przybyłko with 8 goals, alongside with Sergio Santos with 8 goals. Then you got Anthony Fontana with 6 goals, Brendan Aronson with 4 goals, and Jameer Montero rounds out that list of top goals scored with 3 goals to his name. Top assist leader, you got Brendan Aronson, as I mentioned, with 7 assists, followed by Jameer Montero and Kasper Schmeichel with 6 assists. Andrew Wooten finished with 4 assists in fourth place, and then rounding off the top assist leader is Elzinho with 3 assists. So, what went right for the Union? They won the Supporters Shield, which is pretty much an obvious thing that went right for them this season, and become only one of the 3 MLS teams to end up with silverware by the end of the year. They really become the best homegrown academy in the league, and really shot up to be at that number 1 position as who actually has the best homegrown academy in the league. Like, it's not just the fact that they, of course, were able to develop some great homegrown player like Brendan Aronson and Mark McKenzie that they are able to sell off to Europe, but they also have some decent homegrown player that they've already announced that is going to make the next step of potentially be the replacement of some of those homegrown that they sell off to Europe. And that when you have that kind of commitment, and that the fact that some of those next generation and next batch of homegrown talent that's going to be coming through the Union team are also on the list of the top prospect in the league heading into next season, you definitely have a really good homegrown academy. And I really think this season they have overtaken some of the best homegrown academy that we have seen in the league, like FC Dallas and the Red Bulls, with just some of the business that they've been able to do with bring all these young homegrown players to the team, able to develop them, and eventually able to sell them off to Europe for a big sum of money. And then the final thing that went right for the Union this season is that they're actually the only team in MLS to win every single home game in the regular season. And no, I say regular season and not in the season, because they did lose their only home game this season in the playoffs against New England. But other than that, that's kind of impressive. The fact that they were able to win every home games this season. And this also includes the fact that they not only did not lose any home games in the regular season, but they did not even draw any home games this season. Like, they went perfect 9 out of 9 this season at home, which I think they're the only team in MLS history to be able to go an entire regular season without drawing or losing at home. Now, sure, this is a shortened season, and that they only play half of the amount of home games that usually an MLS team would play in the regular season, but still, that's really impressive. The fact that you can go 9 out of 9 in terms of playing at home this season and get all wins in all those home games. And we even see some of the best team, and some of these teams that might even go the entire season without a home loss. They sometimes even suffer a couple of draws throughout the way, but that's just not the case for the Union this season. And again, I really think that they are the only team in MLS history, and I think somebody can basically confirm that in the comments below, that they are the only team in MLS to be able to win every single home games in the regular season in league history. So what went wrong for the Union? Obviously, the thing that went wrong for them is the early playoff exit, and as much as they had the high moment of lifting the Supporters Shield on the final day of the season, it all comes down to a crash just a couple of days later, where they suffer an early playoff exit and really kind of left the season on a bittersweet and you might even say a bitter note, with them being a team that was definitely an MLS Cup contender. A lot of people said that they were going to be representing the Eastern Conference in terms of the appearance of being in the MLS Cup, and that I know in the past there is this so-called Supporters Shield curse, where there's not a lot of team that wins the Supporters Shield that is able to end up going all the way to win MLS Cup, but there's also a case where not a lot of teams that won the Supporters Shield and get themselves eliminated in the first round of the playoffs. And unfortunately, the Union joined that unwanted list of being one of those few teams that won the Supporters Shield, but just a couple of days later in the first round of the playoffs, they flamed out and got eliminated in that game. The second thing that went wrong for this team, and really there wasn't a lot of thing that kind of went wrong with this team besides the early playoff exit, so I kind of had to be a little bit picky in terms of what went wrong with this team. They did had a bit of a mediocre rope form this season in that they didn't finish over 500 in terms of their rope form, as they actually drew and lost more games than they actually won on the road. But still, even with a mediocre rope form like that, if you're able to win every single home games and you go 9 out of 9 on that, you're definitely going to get a good shot in terms of winning the Supporters Shield and able to be the best team in the league in the regular season. And then the last thing that went wrong, and this is not really kind of a thing that went wrong, but more kind of like the fact that they are going to miss some of their best player like Brandon Aronson and Mark McKenzie, who of course make the jump to Europe this off season. But that being said, as I'm actually now this is a good time to kind of make that transition into the moving forward and kind of talk about how with those big sum of money that they of course are able to get, it's going to be interesting to see whether or not if they're going to be using that on as an investment on their academy and continue to improve the academy and bring in these young talented players to break through with the first team, or the fact that they're going to potentially go out to the market and find some potential replacement for Aronson and McKenzie that they lost during this season. I won't be surprised they might even do both of that, where they might use some of that money to invest in the academy, but they also will use some of the money to maybe go into the market and look to try to find some replacement. So far, it's been really quiet in terms of the Union front, in terms of players that is rumored to come to the team. So most likely, I'm assuming they're choosing the first option of once again heavily invest in the academy and hope to bring in some of the next batch of young talent that is gonna break through with this team. Which, speaking of which, that also leads me to the next point of the moving forward, where again, as I said, they're bringing the next batch of young talented player from the academy, and that I know there's going to be question whether or not if this next batch of young talent coming out of the Union Academy is going to be as good as the previous one. Well, judging by the fact that some of them are already on the list as the top prospect player coming out of MLS, then yeah, most likely they're going to be just as good as the previous generation, and I won't be surprised this generation and this next batch of young talent player in a year or two or so, they could potentially also be making the jump to Europe. And then the third thing that moving forward for the Union is that I think they should be back being an MLS Cup contender. And I know next season that they're obviously not only want to get back to the playoffs, but they're not going to be satisfied with just getting back to the playoffs now that they have made the playoffs 2 seasons in a row and really have established themselves as a regular playoff team. But it's now all about trying to make that next step and trying to compete for MLS Cup and potentially go all the way to the conference final. Again, this team, as much as this has been a historical year with them winning their first ever trophy, this team still have not got past the second round, and that this is that if they are able to try to make that next step and trying to have another historical year next season, they definitely want to get themselves to the conference final, even make it to MLS Cup. I mean, we've seen before in MLS and generally in other leagues too, where when a team suffer an early playoff exit after having an incredible regular season, the very next season they're definitely going to be hungry and trying to have some unfinished business to try to get themselves into their ultimate goal at the beginning of the season, which is winning MLS Cup. And I'm assuming this Union team heading into next season, they're definitely going to have some unfinished business, and they're looking to try to go all the way to MLS Cup this season, even though they of course lost some of their best young player from last season that of course was sold off to Europe. But yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it for the moving forward series for the Philadelphia Union. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video? And as always, if you're a Union fan, what went right, what went wrong, and most importantly, moving forward, how your team is going to look next season. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.